And an ambassador for the Hyderabad ecosystem as well. Welcome, Vas. We would like to kickstart the evening with a presentation of prestigious Genome Valley Excellence Award to Dr. Vas Narasimhan in recognition of his remarkable contributions to the global healthcare. Before presentation ceremony, can we please have the AV now? May I now request Honorable Ministers to kindly come on the dais and present Dr. Narasimhan with the prestigious award. Thank you, Honorable Ministers. Now, I hand over the floor to Vas for his keynote address.
So thank you, and thank you all very much, and really honored by both ministers. Thank you for the incredible award. I think having this award here in India, of course, the birthplace of my parents, grandparents, an incredible honor to have the Genome Valley Excellence Award bestowed upon me. And I'm looking forward to just sharing a few perspectives I have on reimagining medicine, some of the big trends that I see shaping this industry, and then look forward to the dialogue with the distinguished panel of CEOs. I did want to begin with a reflection, because I, of course, stand on the shoulders of giants in order to even be on this stage. My grandparents came from Tirupati and of course, the state of Andhra Pradesh. You can see here my grandmother and grandfather, the only pictures I could find of them. Both, of course, coming from India, working very hard to give my parents the opportunity to eventually make it to the United States. This is a picture of my grandfather as he graduated from Delhi University in pharmacology. One of the most remarkable stories of my journey is shortly after graduating, he went to Pune to work in the pharmaceutical firms that were developing there. And he was given an internship to actually go to Basel to see Bagagi, which of course would later become Novartis, the company I stand here as CEO of. So we stand on the shoulder of giants. I'm humbled by the fact I'm here, and I'm grateful for the incredible sacrifices that all of them made to enable us to have the education that we've had. I also would be remiss, they're not here today, but if I didn't thank my parents, Salathur Narasimhan and Geeta Narasimhan. My father came from the National Chemical Laboratories, where he did his PhD in Pune. My mother is a nuclear engineer. Here they were with me when I received the National Academy of Medicine induction, the highest honor in U.S. medicine. I again would be nowhere without such wonderful parents who prioritized me and my siblings over everything else. Came again from very humble environments here in India. And so a big thank you to both of them as well. And lastly, my wife and children, who also are not here, but without whom I would be nowhere as well. My wife is my life coach, my best friend, somebody I think without whom I would surely not be in the place that I am. And I have two incredible boys, Kabir and Sai, who speak fluent German or learning French, unfortunately no Hindi or Tamil at the moment, but we'll work on that in the future. But a big thank you to them as well. So I wanted to now turn to reimagining medicine and talk about four trends I see fundamentally shaping the future of our sector. The first is what is a therapeutic, and the long arc of history that medicine has had and where I believe it will head in the future. If you go back in time, for most of human history, we had no medicine. We believed that life was shaped by spirits, was shaped by the gods. It was really only in the late 1800s we began to discover that chemicals could shape human life, that chemistry could shape human biology. And it was from that setting that we had the birth of the modern pharmaceutical industry. Modern pharmaceutical industry, of course, grew over the 1900s, and with it, life expectancy grew as well, from under 40 years of age to now today to 80 to 90 years of age. Along that time period, we moved from the world of chemistry and chemicals to then biologicals, larger molecules, proteins, which of course are produced here in India, in Bangalore, and in Hyderabad. These biologics in the late 1980s really created a new revolution in how we tackle human disease. Today we enter a new era. We enter a new era where we can actually shape the genome. We can use cell and gene therapies to tackle some of the most difficult conditions that currently affect humanity. This is one of our centers at Novartis in Switzerland that is involved in cell therapies. You can see the technicians here. These technicians are involved in taking human cells out of cancer patients, reprogramming those cells, and then in many cases leading to remarkable improvements in these patients' cancers. This is the future of medicine, and I think now increasingly companies in our sector have to carry the full range. We have to be about cardiovascular disease, malaria, pulmonary diseases that of course affect hundreds of millions of patients all around the world. And I'm proud that Novartis continues our hard work in those conditions. But we also are now going to have to be able to tackle the new world of cell and gene therapies, RNA therapies, and similar technologies which open up the horizon for how we can treat human condition and improve human life. The fundamental goal, of course, is to keep bending the curve of life. How do we keep increasing life expectancy, healthy life expectancy on this planet? And with the power of technology, we have the ability to do that. There is no better time to be alive than this moment, when science-based technology is creating so much for human life. Now, at the same time, fundamentally, we have a significant challenge in the world of access. And how do we create access to these medicines? And I think that's the second revolution happening right now in our industry. When you look at it historically, companies like ours were primarily involved in drug donation programs. We donated medicines for conditions like leprosy. Novartis donates the global supply of leprosy medicines. Today, we continue to be deeply involved in leprosy control across India. But increasingly what we see now is the goal has to be to provide access to the latest innovations. We do that in our company by our commitment to ensuring that any novel drug we discover is licensed in a low and middle income country within 3 months of it being licensed in the US and Europe, that we make these novel medicines available. We do that in India through our work with access brands, our emerging market brands, which now enable us to bring the latest heart failure medicines, the latest medicines in dermatology and neuroscience to patients across India at scale. So we continue to believe as a company, and I believe we have to be about as an industry, how do we bring the latest innovations? I can tell you I had the opportunity to speak to the Gates Foundation and Bill Gates, and in his mind as well, as much as the challenge to find the next breakthroughs in malaria or in tuberculosis, we have to figure out how to bring these cell and gene therapies, I just told you, to populations all around the world. We have the power, of course, to transform lives in all corners of the planet. I believe access to medicines will be a big part, a really important part of that journey. And India will play an incredibly important role. I can tell you, at our Hyderabad center, we have dedicated teams working on leprosy, working, of course, with our teams in Mumbai on sickle cell disease. For people who aren't aware, there's more sickle cell patients in India than in any other country in the world. So we have to be about bringing the innovation to those patients as well. Now, the third revolution I'll talk about is maybe one you may have heard about. You may have heard about unboss. We're trying to unboss Novartis. We're trying to create an inspired, curious, and unbossed culture. And this is also part of a broader transformation, I believe, that's happening in corporations all around the world. When you think about management theory really came about in the early 1900s when Frederick Taylor was running for Ford Motor Company, large manufacturing plants. Over that time, we developed things like organizational charts and managerial KPIs. People were fundamentally cogs in a big machine to create output. We believe that human beings were motivated by carrots and sticks. If we incent human beings, they will continue to produce more. If we punish for behaviors we don't want, then of course they won't do those behaviors. And that's how modern managerial theory was built. We were thinking about managers. What I find absolutely fascinating is when you want to look for books about leadership, about what does it mean to lead others, you have to go back to Eastern thought. The books I often prescribe are the Tao Te Ching and the Bhagavad Gita, where you actually learn about what is servant leadership. And the reason that becomes so important today is now companies like ours are filled with knowledge workers that are fundamentally motivated by being inspired by a sense of purpose, believing in curiosity and growing their own minds and learning, and having a sense of autonomy and ownership, an unbossed mindset. That is the future of work. And the faster companies can embrace that shift, the more their knowledge workers will be able to solve the problems. In fact, a boss is not a boss at Novartis anymore. You're an unboss. We like to tell our bosses you're not at the top of the pyramid, you're at the bottom. And your job is to remove obstacles for these incredible young people that you see on the screen here. This is our Novartis contingent at One Young World. Now, just to show you what I see in a big company like Novartis, I thought I would just share a 1-minute video on some of the images from my 2 years now as CEO. I think what we have to believe is fundamentally that people drive performance, that cultures drive performance. People often ask me, what is the legacy you want to leave at Novartis? The most important legacy I think I could possibly leave is creating this culture of inspired, curious, and unbossed, so that a new generation of leaders can create the next wave of innovations that transform health around the world. We believe it deeply. We lead with it in every one of our discussions with our company. And we hope we'll be able to show the world, show the corporate world at least, by investing deeply in your people, you can generate incredible performance. Now, the last transformation I want to say a word about is the transformation of digital technologies. This is a picture from one of our centers where we monitor 550 clinical trials at Novartis in real time. We call it the Sense platform. The transformation of data science and digital in companies in healthcare, I think, is now reaching a tipping point. Our ability to organize and harness data sets at scale, to use those data sets, whether it's internal or external, to improve our operations, improve how we run our business, find new medicines, find new patient populations, and fundamentally improve human health, is happening at a blistering pace. We believe that ultimately we have to be a data science company. That's why we call ourselves a leading medicines and data science company. That data science is going to really shape, we believe, the future of our company. It's with great pride that I actually can announce to you today that as part of that journey, we launched 2 major initiatives today at our Hyderabad site. The first is the Novartis Biome of Hyderabad. Novartis Biome is our effort to engage the startup community around the world to take on problems that matter for healthcare. So I'd like to please say a round of applause for our Novartis Biome team, which will be now bringing the engagement with startups. I see many of the colleagues here, and a big congratulations to all of you. We have Novartis Biomes in San Francisco, in Paris, in London, and now in Hyderabad. It's because we see the tech ecosystem here to be truly world-class, And we believe by engaging with that tech ecosystem, we'll have the opportunity to transform our company. We also launched a new effort here as well called Novartis Business Services X, NBSX, another exciting initiative that's again based out of Hyderabad that will enable us to again transform our operations. Now, one exciting example I just wanted to share, because I think it shows the power of how technology can transform access to medicine, is the story of Zipline. Zipline is a drone company. It's a drone company that currently operates across multiple countries in Africa. With their drones, they're able to supply large quantities of medicines to various villages in far places, including blood, including vaccines, including medicines. We're partnering with Zipline in Ghana to bring our medicines to a vast region across the country. And here's just a brief video to show you what we're up to.
Jan, if I could request you to go up on stage. Shri Dilip Bhai.
I say, okay.
Mr. Dilip Sangvi, Mr. Ajay Pyramid, Mr. Satish Reddy.
So thank you for that amazingly perceptive, amazingly lucid presentation. Thank you so much. And thank you for the kind words about Hyderabad and what you guys do here. And also, I think what really deserves a huge round of applause is the fact that Novartis' Biome, first in Asia, is being set up in Hyderabad. Thank you very much for that. And thank you for your continued endorsement. Honorable Minister, thank you so much, sir, for taking the time out and joining us. You've been a great supporter of the business at large in India, but the pharma industry, the life sciences industry, in fact, Hyderabad today, sir, just to bring you up to speed on the event. This is our 17th BioAsia 2020, and the theme of BioAsia now for this year is today for tomorrow. So if we have to use today and if we have to talk about today for tomorrow, let me start with a leading question and let me ask you quickly. Honorable Prime Minister talks about a 5 trillion economy by 2025. What do you believe for the life sciences sector, for the pharmaceutical industry, for the biotech industry, for medical devices industry in this country? What do you believe, what is the plan of Government of India to reach that 5 trillion economy? And specifically with respect to life sciences sector, if you could please bring us up to speed.
Thank you very much, Ramarao Garu, and compliments to you for organizing this 17th conference to promote this end of the science and technology vision of the country in such a grand manner, befitting Hyderabad as a destination for the pharma, biosciences and innovation industry. And that was truly a very inspiring address. Mr. Ramarao, the $5 trillion economy also has as its leg a very important component of happiness of the people of India. And I think while we can calculate all the numbers around the pharma industry, we can discuss that it's a $40 billion economy, industry, possibly rapidly growing and scaling up to $100 billion industry soon. We can talk of all the wonderful work that's happening in the sector. But I think the importance of this area of work cannot be ignored for its contribution to a better life, to a better future for the people of India. As Mr. Narasimhan very rightly pointed out, innovation can't be seen only in the context of change or only in the context of, at times as people worry, a threat. I think innovation provides you an opportunity to reach out to the remotest corners of the country, to all the people that we saw in some of the videos, yearning for a better quality of life, for better health care, for longer life expectancy and a healthier life. And in that sense, the $5 trillion economy will be incomplete if our people don't have the quality of life, if we are not able to provide affordable health care to every single citizen of the country. And certainly what's happening in Hyderabad, with the presence of so many large giants in the space of innovation, biosciences, research, development, also augurs well for creating that cutting-edge technology into the country, introducing cutting-edge technology and imbibing in our youth that inquisitiveness that's necessary for a fast-growing economy, that's necessary for our youngsters to really evolve themselves, engage with the rest of the world. I'm glad that Hyderabad is playing an important role in that. You are attracting talent from within the country, from international companies. You're able to add new dimensions to the pharma sector. I think it's time we re-looked at the entire sector to see what would be the next level of engagement with the world, with international technologies, with research in the country. And I'm very sure with the kind of support, with the kind of engagement and involvement you've been able to bring up in this very important convention will help us redefine the future of the pharma and biosciences sector. I would urge all of you in the course of your discussions to come up with ideas, come up with suggestions on what we could do next to really make this sector thrive, to make it grow faster. Of course, even in a slowing world economy, I'm glad that the sector is doing well in India. I hear that you're growing at about 10% even during the current year. I just hope coronavirus doesn't land up creating a bottleneck in these ambitious plans that you have. But again, that will also possibly throw up some new opportunities for the sector to solve that problem also. But all in all, I think this sector in terms of numbers will of course play an important role both directly and through the ecosystem you create. But more importantly, will add that dimension which is a must for a country which is aspiring at the first stage to be a $5 trillion economy. But as I have studied across the world, economies, once they reach the $3,500–4,000 per capita level, which a $5 trillion economy will mean, they really are at the cusp of a takeoff, where one can then aspire to go into $10 and $20 trillion economies. So I'm sure this sector is going to be at the forefront of our ambitions for India, and I wish this sector well. I wish Hyderabad well in the days and years to come.
Thank you, Piyush ji. Let me just quickly follow up with one question, sir. So you talked about how big a role Indian pharma industry has played in terms of the Make in India campaign. In fact, they've been one of the foremost manufacturers, so to speak, from the industry's perspective, from the Indian industry's perspective. Pharma industry especially has been a hugely successful story. They manufacture, they ship across the world, and they also supply a great deal of medicines to the rest of the country as well. But in my discussions with them over the course of last couple of years, they pointed out three things. You mentioned China and you mentioned, potential opportunities that could arise from what's happening in China now. So one of the things I believe India has to do, particularly from industry perspective, is we have to operate and we have to leverage economies of scale. Unfortunately, there does not seem to be a policy on large industrial parks. For example, Telangana, in fact, has a proposal this with you in the past for the world's largest pharma cluster called Hyderabad Pharma City. Unless we compete on scale, unless we manufacture on scale, I don't think we'll be able to compete with China or even Cambodia and Philippines, who seem to be leveraging the opportunity in China today. The reason why I ask this is, we've heard Honorable Prime Minister and yourself also talk about making in India. Making in India is of course important and we have to leverage scale. But I think discovering in India is equally important. Research and development is important. But we hear that the weighted average reductions, which were at 200%, are now have been reduced to 150, and eventually after March, it will be at 100%, which is, I don't think, because of R&D. I think this will decelerate the investments in R&D. What's your thought on this?
Well, I think income tax breaks obviously do help in encouraging and attracting investment, but that's not the only factor that determines whether an industry will come to a country, whether an industry will flourish in a country or not. One must recognize that there are several dimensions to India, and we were both together at Davos. You may recall that we had talked in Davos about the power of India being defined as the power of democracy, as the power of demography, as the power of talent, as the power of leadership, all of which culminates in the power of opportunity. And I believe that India is an opportunity which provides a huge market, 1.3 billion people aspiring for a better quality of life. We have a huge amount of talent, large pool of skilled manpower, very, very enthusiastic, well-trained, and I would say innovative thinkers from all across the country, a large number of them coming from this region. We have a leadership which is willing to take bold and strong decisions at the center, in the states. We have a situation where we would have the world's largest proportion of working age people, almost more than 50% of our population would be in the working age in the next 3 years. And that situation will continue for nearly 3 decades. Now, all of these are advantages which need to be leveraged, which will be leveraged, will provide opportunities. And I think working in a country where there is a rule of law, working in a country where there is justice available, working in a country where there is a domestic market potential which is huge, which provides the economies of scale in terms of market, is itself a value proposition which, whether it's China or Cambodia or Philippines, none of them can offer in this holistic a manner as India can. Tax breaks, of course, are a matter that one can discuss, one can talk to the industry and understand what needs to be done. But more importantly, I think we need to de-bottleneck the day-to-day constraints, if any, that industry has. And one which I can share with you is an area of concern at the center also. We recently had a meeting of the Council of Scientific and Industrial Research, CSIR, and during the course of the discussions, the Prime Minister did talk about finding solutions to make clinical trials more robust, more easy to operate and easy to implement in the country, something which Mrs. Swati Piramal, had talked to me many years ago about. And I think the Prime Minister is very, very keen that that's an area which we need to address, and such areas that the industry may be facing. We would urge all of you to come up with your requests or your asks on a more practical or a more technical framework. Income tax and these breaks are always valuable, but certainly are not the end of the tunnel. It's not the end of the road. It's at best an enabler, let's draw a larger line in front of the income tax break rather than struggling and remaining restricted only around that issue.
All right, sir. I'll have one quick question for you, and then we'll move on to other panelists here. Sir, I think in my discussions again with the industry over the last couple of days, one of the other things very important things that came up, especially in industry like the pharma industry, they spend billions of dollars in research and development. And in India, when it comes to IP and enforcing IP, the gray areas between that emanate from the fact that the state and the center sometimes seem a bit disjointed and disconnected, apparently is also hurting further investments from coming into R&D. How do you see Government of India, in fact, addressing this issue?
In what way does the state come into the picture?
Well, the central, of course, the DCGI, in fact, works with the investor or the industry to, and then the state actually gives the authority or the permission to manufacture. So when this is disjointed and when somebody, in fact, the gentleman who spoke to me said he had 30 infringement, IP infringement cases filed in the last few years, so which is a huge number. Yeah. And this is one organization.
Well, I know that the IP department has been trying to reorient itself. And when I was doing a review of the department about a couple of months ago, the numbers that they shared with me in terms of their ramping up their own operations, the speed with which they are able to give out patents or copyright licenses, trademarks, has significantly been ramped up. And my own direction to the IP offices that we'll have to look at ensuring that all applications get cleared faster than anywhere else in the world. And that's the effort on which we are moving in terms of the speed of action for any request that the industry makes to the IP office. In terms of infringement, what I believe is the industry would like us to give out more information in the public domain about the patents that are registered. And I think there are two schools of thought. There is, of course, the issue of infringement, but on the other hand, there is the concerns around patents. And what I was explained was that this is something which is contraindicatory to each other. And it's still an area where we've not yet come to an ideal world situation. But I've had some engagement with pharma industry. Mr. Sanghvi also met me and shared some of his thoughts about what should be done to reconcile these two issues. But with an open mind, we are willing to engage with the industry. We are willing to talk to the state. In fact, as recently as yesterday, I have proposed to the Department for Promoting Industry and Internal Trade, DPIIT, that we should look at a framework in which the states and the center come to a legally binding agreement amongst themselves to work as partners, to work in support of each other in the promotion of industry so that industry can get a stable, simple and a predictable regulatory framework. And any state which infringes on that or which does not uphold the sanctity of contracts or sanctity of any of these patent infringements, for example, or commitments made by one government being changed by another government or contested by another government, I think these are areas that the center is taking very seriously, and we will have to have some kind of a reward or penalty mechanism even between the center and the states, so that the image of India as a country can be maintained and the respect that India enjoys today worldwide should not be harmed by the actions of one or two delinquent states at any point of time. But I accept your point that we will have to ensure that such patent infringements are taken to task very seriously, very quickly, and the center and states will all have to work together on this.
So thank you very much. Thank you very much for that elaborate answer, sir. Vas, what we saw in the video there, the grandfather goes to Basel as an intern, and the prodigal grandson returns to be the CEO of Novartis. Nothing less than a Bollywood movie, yeah? Nothing short of a Bollywood movie plot. Congratulations on all the success. We are absolutely proud and thrilled to have you leading Novartis in the world and putting India in the world map. So many, many congratulations. A big round of applause for Vas. Vas, let me quickly ask you a question. I know you're big on convergence of different spheres of industry. Hyderabad is hub, not just for Novartis. This is not Novartis' second largest office in the world, but Hyderabad is home to Amazon, Facebook, Apple, Google, Microsoft, Uber, Salesforce, ServiceNow. All of their second largest offices in the world today are right here. I know you're big on convergence. So this whole sphere of IT and life sciences, I know you also have enjoyed this amazing sphere of additional drug discovery. Can you tell us a bit more about the opportunities, this convergence presence, because the world is evolving every day. We would like to hear from you.
Yes, and thank you, and thank you again for the kind words. Hyderabad is extraordinary, and having visited here since, in some form or another, since 2009, seeing how the ecosystem in around our campus has exploded has been extraordinary. So now, of course, we see all of the sectors, but particularly the tech sector. And what we see is a few different areas where we believe technology will transform a company like Novartis, but also the entire sector. The first is just in how we operate. When you look at companies like ours, multinational companies, we operate in 150 countries, 108,000 people. Whether it's in how we run our clinical trials and how we can use machine learning, predictive analytics to run large-scale operations around the world, whether it's in our manufacturing centers where we can now increasingly use AI to better optimize our supply chains and optimize our manufacturing. We have sales representatives, 10,000 sales representatives who have an AI-generated insight given to them every morning on how to spend their day. We even have built in Hyderabad procurement engines that help us better spend the $16 billion we spend every year. So transforming our own operations is going to be significant, and we do that through partnerships. We have a significant partnership with Amazon, we have a significant partnership with Microsoft, and a range of other partnerships. The second big trend that will happen, or is already happening, is how do we mine the large data sets in healthcare? And those data sets, I think the best understood use case is mining medical images. So medical images, whether they're x-rays, scans of the retina, CT scans, and how you can use those scans to better diagnose disease, hopefully find different patient populations. That's one very significant use case. But we see many others. When you mine large data sets, can you better understand which patients might go into heart failure decompensation, or which patients might have a flare of their rheumatological illness? Clearly, those data sets are going to be very important. Some countries are very advanced. We work with Tencent in China on a major partnership in heart failure. We just announced a major partnership with the UK government to look at how to use large-scale data sets in cholesterol lowering as well. So these things are happening. I believe in the next 10 years, those data sets will rapidly transform how we diagnose and manage patients. The big unknown is, can you use AI to better understand human biology? And there are companies actually here in Hyderabad working on it. But sometimes we underestimate how magical it is we find any medicines at all. I like to tell audiences that in the history of the US FDA, it's only approved 100 years. It's only approved about 1,500 medicines. There's only about 600 validated drug targets we've ever found. This is an industry that spends about $175 to $200 billion a year in R&D. And we're lucky if we find 20 new medicines in the whole world in a year. And why is that? It's because in the human body, you have 40 trillion cells. Every cell has 1 trillion molecules, and the complexity is just vast. And there's so much we don't understand in the 4 billion years of evolution that's in every one of us. So that's the big opportunity. Can we use AI to find new drugs that we would have never found before? That's the hope. We're investing in it. Many great companies here in India are investing in it. And if we could use that AI combined with scientific human ingenuity to find drugs we wouldn't have found before, maybe double the number of new medicines we find, that would, of course, be a huge, huge breakthrough.
Fascinating. Fascinating, fascinating. We look forward to the day when we have more happening in AI with Novartis, with Biome, and with all the cool things that you're doing here. Jan, you heard the Honorable Minister. You heard him clearly, and his commitment to IP, his commitment to ensuring that we have more and more happening in your sphere of work. The one thing I wanted to ask you, in fact, the city that you sit in right now is not only home to India's 35% of Indian pharmaceuticals being produced from here. We are also the vaccine capital of the world. In fact, 35% of global vaccines are produced from Hyderabad, but we are greedy. We want more. So how do we get a company like Merck to come into India, to look at manufacturing opportunities, to look at doing more here? What do you say are the 1, 2, and 3 mission critical things to the Honorable Minister and myself on making this happen? I want to put you in a spot here.
Thanks for a great question. Honorable Ministers, I'd like to go back to Minister Goyal, who said that what we are really all trying to do is to think about having people here that are healthy, because we know that when people in India are healthy, that they will be productive and that you will create wealth. And actually the coronavirus outbreak in China right now clearly demonstrates that. Now, the best impact by far that you can have on human health is vaccination. It's prevention of disease. And so what many of the leading companies continuously are doing is continuing to strive to, on the one hand, develop new vaccines, and on the other hand, to make sure that we have enough supply for the diseases that need these vaccines. What we are looking for in countries across the world is really a mix. On the one hand, we're looking for a local market where there is actually a remuneration of all of the effort that companies have done to bring these vaccines to the market. And of course, that's going to be very different by country depending on the macroeconomic conditions of the country, but you're seeking for some form of remuneration. Secondly, the easier the regulatory framework, the better, the more achievable it is for us to deliver vaccines. To give you an example, many vaccines today are in short supply across the world, and sometimes we find ourselves in a situation that a certain country that had asked for a vaccine may not need to supply, and we want to deliver that to the country next door, and because of regulatory barriers, it's very, very difficult to do that. So how can we make it as easy as possible from a regulatory point of view? And then, of course, last but not least, this element of intellectual property. How do we make sure that also vaccines that will be invented in India are kind of protected in the right way? So with that, I know India, with more than 1 billion people, will be, incredibly important for all of us, both from making a difference for the people that need the vaccines, as well as in terms of the business. It's a real win-win.
I completely endorse your opinion on immunization and vaccines. But let me quickly also ask you, what's your view on price control? What's your view on making sure that the medicine is affordable and also accessible, and therefore some sort of regulatory measures that are brought in by governments and price control? What's your view on that?
Yeah, I mean, affordability is a word that we hear across the world everywhere these days. Even in the US, the word affordability is used on a continuous basis. I actually prefer the word access. And access is really multifaceted. It starts with making sure that you have the right healthcare system in place that diagnoses people, that you then have the right treatment with the right facilities, and that you also have the right follow-up. Of course, as an industry, we need to think about the differences between a country like India versus a country like the United States in terms of how we set responsible pricing. However, again, it's a fallacy to think that it's all about pricing. And let me give you one very specific Indian example. In India, half of all the women suffer from anemia. Now, you have drugs to treat iron deficiency that cost only 1 to 2 rupees a day. So this is not a question of price. So what we all should be focusing on to make a difference for the people of India is access. How do we ensure that people have access through diagnosis, treatment, and the appropriate follow-up and medication?
Thank you. Thank you. And Dilip, let me quickly bring you into the discussion. Indian pharma industry and its success. We've largely relied on generics, in the last few decades. Now, you have the Union Commerce Minister here. What would you want Government of India and state governments in India to do so that we have Indian pharma industry also move up the product value chain and start looking at more opportunities in R&D, start discovering our own molecules? I know Vas said only 20 of them get discovered, even though you spend billions of dollars, but still, I think it's a chance worth taking. So, what is it that you would want to tell the Honorable Minister and myself and to the audience that are watching us? What can Indian industry do about the product value chain? What is it that the government should be doing?
I think you've raised a very important issue at the stage at which our industry is right now. If I see globally, Indian companies are an important player in the generic business, but that's a relatively small subset of the total global business. Even though in the US and in
Dilip, can you please move the mic close to you? Please,
even in the US or other markets, more than 5% of the prescriptions are filled with generics. The value terms, it's a very small percentage of the global markets. And the challenge for Indian companies are a little bit different than what you would talk about for global companies. And that's what I think, if we have to transition from where we are to start participating in the innovative global business, then we will have to do a lot of things very differently from the way in which we've done in the past. Vas talked about close to $200 billion being spent in research every year. But if I look at in India, companies would be spending less than 1.5%